Welcome to Public Safety Talk Radio, the podcast for all of our heroes in public safety, including law enforcement professionals, firefighters, EMTs, corrections officers, healthcare workers, and more. The show is proud to be a part of the growing National Police Podcast Network. This episode is sponsored by Police Mortgage. Police Mortgage is a full-service mortgage company dedicated to serving police officers and first responders. Founded in 2008, Police Mortgage offers a variety of mortgage products tailored to meet the needs of those who serve and protect. Police Mortgage, for first responders who are second to none. Hi, I'm Ken Bader, your host for Public Safety Talk Radio, and I have another intriguing, interesting, fun guest. It's Dr. Stephanie Kahn. She is a psychologist at First Responders Psychology. She's a former law enforcement officer turned psychologist, and the author of Increasing Resilience in Police and Emergency Personnel and Building Effective Peer Support Teams, a guide to creating resilient first responders. Stephanie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. God, it's a mouthful. All the book titles. There's 2 books.
Yeah, I did this. I only wrote 1 book, but yeah, I think the title is longer than one of the chapters. But, you want to get everything in there, man. So it's descriptive.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
But we want to dig into both books. But, the most important question that I have on my mind is, how does a law enforcement professional wake up one day and say, you know what, I'm going to be a psychologist? Was it something that came to you in a dream? Did you wake up and say, yeah, I feel like a psychologist today? Tell us about that journey.
I don't know what waking up and feeling like a psychologist would be. I don't know what that would be. No, there's actually really interesting story, very compelling story. I've actually told that story 4 times this week already, just in talking with one of my fire departments. And so, yeah, I was the daughter of a police officer. My dad was an officer for almost 40 years. I became an officer myself after a 3-year stint of being a dispatcher, and was married to an officer. And when I became a peer team member, and when I was a peer team member, one of my coworkers was killed in the line of duty. And horrific circumstances, but we had a police psychologist at the time, and he understood us and was a great help to us. Fast forward about a year later, we had a changing from the police psychologist to a city psychologist who could be working with someone in the street department or the parks department or police or fire, but really had no specialty training, had no specialty experience. And so when my second coworker was killed in the line of duty, she got rotated front and center, and people did not know her, she did not have a direct understanding of our work. And so as a peer supporter, I couldn't get folks to, nothing against her, her qualifications as
Right.
a
She just
psychologist,
wasn't qualified for that
yeah,
kind of incident. Yeah.
yeah, just the cultural competency and the trust and rapport and that kind of stuff was just not there as it had been with the prior person. And so I looked out to say, okay, well, to see who specializes in working with first responders. And at that time, that was not a specialty. At that time, there were not clinicians that specifically did that. There were clinicians that did the fitness for duty or pre-employment stuff, but on the treatment side, I just couldn't find anyone in that regard. And so I said, you know what, I'm going to step out of policing. I'm going to go ahead and get my degree. I'll come back to policing. I'll have a foot in both fields, if you will. I still love policing. I don't want to leave it, but I also want to fill this gap because I see my brothers and sisters as a peer supporter are struggling, and they really need somebody that's understands that struggle, not just the clinical aspects of it. And so when I stepped out and got my counseling degree, got my master's and then my PhD, hung my little shingle and said, hey, here's my background, here's who I want to support. It was all she wrote, like crazy, just nonsense. I've never wanted for work in terms of the demand. And it's really fascinating because I've had agencies just a couple of weeks ago say, yeah, we heard that so-and-so department had lots of their people asking for help. I don't know why our people aren't asking for help. And I said, I have more people from your department than that department. If I'm doing my job well, if I'm doing my job correctly, you have no idea. My job and who I see and the number of people I see is the best kept secret out there. And so I started my practice, First Responder Psychology, and I can see everybody's schedule. I don't get into anything aside from who's on the schedule just for managing the office. And those types of things. But I'm shocked. I'll see 300 or 400 officers or firefighters or first responders a month being seen in our practice. And so I'm like, wow, there is a demand for cultural competency in this field, and they're willing to ask for support if you hang that shingle and you build that reputation and you make those connections with people, they'll come and they'll ask for that, which is just incredible. It's my one of my old academy mates was up here visiting me last week from Texas, and he looked at me at the breakfast table and smiled, and he goes, "I can just tell you're so happy doing what you're doing." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I'm so happy for you," right? Because he and I go back, to 1999, back to the 1900s, when we went to the academy together. And so it was kind of cool because he could see how excited I was that I get to do what I do. So now,
Yeah, that's terrific. And first, let me tell you how sorry I am that you've lost a couple of colleagues. It's not lost on me. I've never been a police officer, but I have worked with and spoken to hundreds, maybe thousands of them. And some of them, like Scott Brown, who we did the Facing Evil podcast with. He lost his partner in a really horrific way, and so I know vicariously
mm,
what that's like, and really appreciate what you do now, because I know from doing this job as a host of Public Safety Talk Radio, I've talked to a lot of folks that are experts like yourself in helping first responders. And I think to Diane Braun in this season that we were lucky enough to have on twice, she jokes about the fact that people come to see her after a couple of therapists have fired them, where they actually fired their first responder clients. Like, I can't, yeah, I'm a therapist and I can't even listen to this anymore.
yeah, that so ticks me off because I remember doing a training, and this is not an isolated incident, but this one really was a throat punch. I did a training at a police agency, and afterwards on one of the breaks, or during it on one of the breaks, one of the people came up to me and asked me for a referral. He said that he went to see his clinician, and it was his 10th counseling session with his clinician. And she said, "This will be our last counseling session. I now need therapy because of you." And I was like, what? So already she abandons the client because she got in over
Yeah.
her head. And then in her parting gift is a guilt trip on top of it. And
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my God, do you want to talk about the ethics of that and just the cruelty of that statement? So here's this guy just dropped um, by his clinician because she's traumatized because of him. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I can't even believe it.
Isn't there a better way to frickin' do that?
A thousand better ways.
I get it. Regardless of the degree, people are people, and if you haven't experienced it, maybe it's too much for you. But couldn't you just say, you know what? I need to refer you to somebody that can give you more help than I can. Yeah,
Easy
something.
enough.
It's not you effed me up, and I may not even be able to do this job anymore. Thanks.
No, that's what I'm saying. Is his parting gift was a guilt trip, and it was all I could do not to go. Who's the clinician? Like, I seriously want to file a complaint because that is so inappropriate. Because what if this guy had just taken and that was just the end of it, and he didn't? I didn't wasn't there training his department, and he didn't have the courage to have that private conversation with me, right? Like, where would he be at? He would just be feeling rejected. And those stories circulate like wildfire. So as much as I say, if I do my job well, it's the best kept secret there is out there. Nobody knows I'm seeing people in their department and so on and so forth. People don't often, or more often, going to tell about a bad story about somebody being
Right.
a jerk or whatever, then they are going to go and say, oh gosh, this person was great, great. I mean, there is more of that. Times are changing, but people are more apt to complain than they are to applaud. And I think it could also deter other people from asking for help because
Yeah.
it's BS. Right, it's BS. But yeah, I mean, that's what we're faced, or what we historically have faced, and are hopefully facing to a lesser degree. Um, because I've gotten involved with some of the national organizations and some of the local folks, and just said, hey, let's better vet our clinicians. Let's get a specialty list. Let's make sure we put some teeth into that vetting criteria so that we don't get someone that looks great on paper and is looking to for any number of reasons, support first responders, anywhere from altruistic to exploitive.
Hmm.
Let's actually do site visits and interviews and really make sure that these people are doing this for the right reason and aren't going to say, yes, I can work with you, only to find out 10 sessions later they can't.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, you alluded to something just a few minutes ago that things are changing. And I've
mhm,
been one way, shape, or form doing this, meaning podcasting with and for first responders for close to a decade now. And I've seen a shift,
mhm,
and a positive shift where there isn't as much of a stigma, where first responders are wise enough to come see you anonymously. Their departments, the firehouse,
mhm.
it's none of their business what they're going through.
Nope.
And they're brave enough to go and get some help. So
Mhm.
they can do the job at a high level and even more importantly, do the main job of taking care of their families on a high level. So I've had the pleasure of talking to a lot of folks that have your level or close to your level of expertise in working with first responders, and I'm happy to say there's a number of them, it seems like, out
Mhm.
there in the country. And now a word from our sponsor, Police Mortgage.
As a first responder, control isn't optional. It's how you do your job. But when it comes to buying or refinancing a home, most lenders don't get your world. Police Mortgage does. They specialize in working with first responders, walking you through the process, breaking down your options, and helping you lock in competitive rates without the runaround. Take control of your financial future with people who have your back. Visit policemortgage.com or call 312 499 8878. Police Mortgage for first responders who are second to none.
And learn more about Police Mortgage from their podcast, The Mortgage Beat, another podcast in the National Police Podcast Network. From a marketing and branding standpoint, because that's my expertise, what makes first responder psychology so special? Why is that something special for public safety professionals and people in your area should say, you know what, I'm gonna call Stephanie first?
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is that everybody in our practice is either a current or a former first responder. So, I have my background. I've got a former firefighter. I've got a current police officer. I've got a current probation parole officer. I've got a police wife. Even the
Mhm.
practice manager is the granddaughter of a slain trooper. There's nobody in our practice that isn't going to have the cultural competency already. Then add the second, because cultural competency is part of it. Then the second layer is, are they clinically competent? Are they and everyone, if they're not already trained in EMDR, CBTI, which is cognitive behavioral therapy for
Mhm.
insomnia, or critical incident stress management, that kind of stuff, then that is or brain spotting, that is a requirement that they get that training very early on. I said, okay, if I'm going to bring you on, what's your timeline? You've got to register. Here's some various sources for this training and that training. So we're clinically competent. Then we work 6 days a week. We have appointments as early as 7 a.m. for those that get off shift. We work as
Mhm.
late as 8 p.m. We take all the insurances, we take all the EAPs, regardless of what that pay structure is, because we're trying to increase access. So it's cultural competency, clinical competency, and it's all the removing all the barriers that we can possibly remove so that people can receive the help. We just take away anything that might be an impediment. We have an online scheduler, so we don't have to play phone tag, all that kind of stuff. But I think more importantly is our philosophy. And I know people say, "Oh, we got mission statements and blah blah blah," and
Mhm.
the mission statement is something you buy and put on a plaque from Etsy and put it on the wall. It actually runs through and through with everything that we do, and we follow the parable of the waterfall, and I talk about it in both books. Is that, if you can always work on, you can see that people fall into the river and are pushed downstream and are crashing at the bottom of the waterfall, and there will be plenty of work at the bottom of the waterfall. We can scoop people up, they can show up, we can help them with whatever health crisis, work thing, health, whatever the thing might be, we can help them with it there. But we actually find it more ethical and humane, and just effective to work upstream. And so we do quite a bit of work with peer teams. We do a lot of work at the organizational level, whether it be helping mid managers work through and have support on early intervention systems so they can engage with their employees earlier before they're in trouble. Our peer supporters get tons of advanced training and quarterly maintenance training and consultation. So peer supporters know, and I hate putting this on the record, but I will also still continue to put this on the record. Even if they're not on contract with me and they have a crisis, they can message me at 10 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm going to answer their call if someone's in trouble. And I'm going to sit with the peer supporter and say, okay, what do you got? How can I help? What do you know? What are the resources, right? And so we really practice that philosophy of that waterfall. And if we can strengthen our swimmers further upstream, and they know what flotation devices are available to them to keep their head above water, or whose hand they can reach out to that's standing there with the hand extended. We want to be involved in that, and we want to be supporting that. And I'd love it. I'd love to work myself out of a job at the bottom of the waterfall. What a great thing it would be that I could do that. And it's not just me, it's everyone in my practice, because everyone in my practice is like, hey, I want to do an 8-week moral injury group. Good. Tell me what you need to set it up, right? Hey, I'm going to go do a ride along with this agency because I think they need some more FaceTime. Cool. Set it up. Let me know. Just put it on your calendar, right? So we're trying to be as progressive as possible, or proactive as possible, in those domains. And so, and it's not a philosophy, because even as I look at my clinician schedule, they're just like, hey, I'm over here at this agency. Hey, I'm over there. I've got this weekly wellness visit set up for this agency. So we're really practicing that. So.
Well, I'm a alcoholic, 6 years in recovery, and I plan on being in crisis at 3 a.m. on Sunday. Are you available? That laugh is a no.
Yeah.
I'll take care of myself. Don't worry about it.
I want to be careful here. I want to be careful and say, I don't run I'm not a crisis response, but if a peer supporter, if I'm on contract with them or not, says, hey, I'm sitting with someone, I may huff and puff as I see the phone call, but I'm going to get up and walk out of my bedroom and go to the office and say, all right, what you got? And people know that. I mean, people know that. Someone literally texted me 10:30 Saturday night when my old ass was just crawling into bed. And I was just like, what? Okay. All right. That actually could have waited, but sure.
Yeah. Well, don't worry about it. I got a sponsor. He knows my goofy sense of humor. But in seriousness, I'm on the board of the Wounded Blue, and I know they have a peer support line. You certainly, if you're working with Stephanie, can certainly bother her at all hours. I don't know the 800 number offhand, but if you go to thewoundedblue.org, that 1-800 number is squarely on there, and I encourage anybody in crisis or with a problem to utilize that peer support number. But you mentioned that you wrote a couple of books in all of your spare time, and I was wondering if you're going to laugh at that or not.
No.
And the first one, if I remember it correctly, is Increasing Resilience in Police and Emergency Personnel, Strengthening Your Mental Armor. And I believe that is available today on Amazon and other places. So tell us more about it. Hey, then she's got it right there. Way to be on cue.
Well, I had to go get it out of my stack downstairs.
You dust it off?
I had it available. No, there's actually no dust on it. It actually feels nice.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I wrote the original version of this. It came out in 2018, but you may or may not be aware of this, or your listeners may not be aware of this, but a lot of shit happened in 2020.
Yeah.
And so,
I'm aware.
Yeah.
My audience is aware.
I'm joking, of course. And so it was really important to me to go back in and say, okay, let's talk about how the first responder profession has changed. Some of the challenges have changed. There's more recognition of things like moral injury. There's more recognition 2021 of the impact of the Great Resignation, when a lot of people left the profession after COVID and after the civil unrest of 2020, and how that put the squeeze on the people that were left. And a lot of people moved up in the ranks, but they didn't necessarily get the support that they needed to move up in the ranks, but they were committed to their profession and, trying to do their best and try to keep their agency afloat. And so what were the effects on those people, and the generational differences that came in, and so it was a lot of the updates needed to occur to include some of those demands and changes that fell out of 2020 and beyond. And then some of it was honestly some of the advances of what we understood helped people. And some of it was advances in the neuroscience of early intervention for trauma, and some of the, more of the breathing protocols, and our understanding about how some of this stuff in performance psychology that we've used in athletics and in the military applies in first responder profession. So there was a lot of information that was being developed, but then there was a lot of information that I just even wasn't aware of as a person with who only knows what she knows and doesn't know what she doesn't know. And so as I became aware of more things, I was like, that really needs to be in my next edition. I really want that to be something, because my first response, one case in point, I oftentimes share the research that came out that showed Tetris, viewing or playing the video game Tetris for 10 to 20 minutes within a 5 or 6 hour window of a trauma reduces flashbacks and nightmares by about 50%. And that if you miss that window, then you can reopen that window by reflecting on what the trauma memory was, or writing about it, or talking about it. You've reopened that window of time, and playing Tetris at that point can also lessen the likelihood of it coming back in an intrusive manner. Well, I learned that shortly after my manuscript in 2018 was done, and I couldn't do anything to add it to the books. I was like, snapdragons, I need to add it to the to the next round, or to the next version. And so I added it to the next version. So that's what I ended up adding, with some of those pieces of information I either learned about, or advances in the neuroscience, or some of the changes in demands, and some of the things that were available to peer supporters all got added to that new edition.
Awesome. And for the record, Tetris is very valuable. True story. I used to play that after drinking long nights in college, and I got the spins. I would play Tetris for an hour, and I'd be able to go to sleep. So maybe all we need is Tetris.
I do not think so. No, we didn't. Tetris, it's funny because I just sent one of my fire departments here, use the Tetris for trauma, and it is good for anxiety. It's interesting. Some of the additional research that's come out has shown that doing EMDR, which is a treatment modality I use, and then adding Tetris afterwards, that it's the 1-2 punch. EMDR is really good for trauma, and Tetris also accentuates that benefit, but then also lowers anxiety. And which is interesting, because I've had some people say, oh my gosh, seeing the falling blocks causes me anxiety. So it's not for all people, but the research did actually support that, which was interesting. And these are randomized controlled trials. So these were like controlled studies where they were able to isolate the, people that did it versus didn't do it. And the third kind of nonsensical condition, to try to make sure they were getting the results they thought they were getting. But
well, I don't care what you say. I'm going to rename this episode Tetris, the Cure-All.
Okay, take my name off of it.
Yeah. Interview over.
Yeah.
All right, getting back into serious mode, you have a new book coming out, which actually was, all BS aside, that really attracted me to your expertise on LinkedIn. You're promoting Building Effective Peer Support Teams, which I am, oh, look at that, which I am a big supporter of. Building Effective Peer Support Teams, a guide to creating resilient first responders. So why should we be running to our phones and opening up our Amazon app to pre-order that sucker right now?
Well, one, there's nothing like it. And this is what is just amazing. As I sent the proposal to my editor, I did a search. I was like, there's nothing that is I mean, there's very little that's out there at all regarding peer support. In fact, that is one of the things the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Act called for additional research and support and, standardization and those types of things years ago. And so it was incredibly important to, once again, see that there's this gaping hole of knowledge and wanting to try to kind of pull together what knowledge was there, pull it all together into one resource, because a lot of the things that I'm seeing in the peer teams, I mean, I'm attached to several peer teams, but in agencies who don't have peer teams, what I was seeing is they didn't know what they didn't know. Their profession is to do firefighting or medical calls or police services or those types of things. It's not to build peer teams. So they look to us to say, where's the protocols for this? Where's the forms for this? What's the procedure for this? And we just really were not giving them anything that's just like, here's what it looks like, and here's how it's all distilled, and this can kind of become your guide towards building your program, or your guide towards maintaining your program. Because that's the other challenge, is that some people will build a program and they'll say, hey, we're gonna and they'll do what they think is right. They're like, hey, who wants to be on peer support? Hands go up. All right, cool. You're on peer support, and we're going to meet every now and then, get some training, and good luck with that. And so you might have well-meaning people raise their hands. You might have busybodies raise their hand. You might have well-meaning people that are wounded healers raising their hand. And so they're really, or you may have had just wonderful people nominated from the get-go, and then they weren't cared for along the way. And peer support skills are just like skills, shooting skills, driving skills, medical interventions. These things have to be practiced. These things have to be updated. These things have to be, you need to be so proficient at them that you're not practicing it really with the peer that really needs you to be dialed in. And so the book, I wrote the book, and it's so funny because it sounds terrible. But I told the publisher, I said in my proposal, I said 200 pages, which is what I write. It's not, if I write 200 pages, it ends up being 100 or 50 or 75 or something really low by the time you actually get it. And it ended up being 375. And which, again, don't freak out. You're not going to get a 375 page book and go, oh my gosh.
The best part was probably on 373 and they cut it out, right?
Oh, no, it was 375. And they were just like, what are you doing? You said 200. And they said, cut it. Can you cut it to 350? So I started using contractions and more brevity of speech. And I literally got it to 350, which is, again, don't freak out. You're not going to have this like novel. It's still going to be a reasonable size. By the time they do the copy editing and smushing, it'll be a normal size book. And the cool thing is there's a lot of templates in there. It's just like, hey, do you want to nominate? Here's what a nomination template looks like. Do you want to do annual interviews with your people to make sure to coach them through? Are you still engaged? Do you still have a commitment to this? How do you see yourself growing in this capacity and peer support? Like, what kind of things do you want to learn or contribute to or grow, and how do you want to grow? What are some of the challenges that you had this past year, and how can I support you in that? So there's kind of interview protocols for those types of things. There's agreements for here's a confidentiality agreement or participation agreement, or here's a survey that you can send out to your department to see how people are receiving peer support, right? And the survey is actually the work of Dr. Jack Digliani, who has written a couple of peer support books, albeit a couple of years older and a little bit smaller. But I take not meant to speak disparagingly at all, because I feel like much of Jack's work, I'm standing on his shoulders and then just saying, I love everything you do, and I'm going to add 2 or 3 things to it. In fact, Jack is one of the people that reviewed my book, was generous enough to do that. And so that's the idea of this book, is to give people these templates, to give people these interviews, to give people the structure from like an organizational standpoint and a structural standpoint of not just building the team, but making sure they stay effective and that they stay sharp. But then I also get into the nitty gritty, where I talk to the peer team members themselves and said, okay, what if you're sitting with someone that you really want them to get help, but they're really unsure about getting help? How do you have that conversation in a way today that is going to be, and this is where I borrow from some of my hostage negotiations and interrogation training and some of my training as a clinician, where I infuse some of those concepts so that they have an informed way to have conversations with people about suicide, about not getting help, about having proper boundaries. Because as much as I was joking, hey, if someone messages me at 3 a.m,
Mhm.
I'll
That was my joke,
respond
not
to them.
yours, just for the
Yeah,
record. Yeah, but go
as much
ahead.
as much as it was joked, I also do believe that peer supporters sometimes get themselves set up poorly by saying, "Call me anytime, every time, whenever, and any at anything," and then the
Yeah,
person takes it at face value
literally.
and calls them all the time and anytime, and the first responder still has their normal job, they have their family, they have their own health, they have their own stuff, and then they start to feel or can start to feel overwhelmed by it.
Yeah, a
And so
burden.
yeah, and so instead of saying, "Oh, well, just at these hours at this specific time," I understand peer support is different than clinical work. I will support the first responder or peer supporter, and I do this in the book, to set up expectations with that peer in the first place. Say, "Hey, I'm here for you. You're going through a rough patch right now. I'm going to see you through this rough patch. Who else is in your social support system, or who else can we kind of get in to kind of have this these multiple sources of support, because I'm here for you, but I'm not going to be all things or know all things or be available to you at all times." So who might the other one or two or three people in your world be, and how do we kind of make sure you have what you need there, right? So really is finding a very reasonable way to build or help them rebuild or identify their network of support, because that's part of what peer support is should be doing, instead of being the end all be all for that person. Because I tell them it might feel really good when the person says, "You're the only person I can talk to. You're the only
Mhm.
person that understands me." But there's something that should be going off in the back of your head that's saying, "Oh no, why don't they have more people to talk to? Why don't they have more people that understand them? This is actually not good," right? Because what if the peer supporter was in an accident or had to
Mhm.
rush off to their own emergency? This person needs to have other people in their world that also understands them. And so, as much as that warms our heart to feel that they appreciate us, or appreciate me as a clinician, that's a concern. So I have those, like, how to have those conversations, and then how to navigate things like, what if the person is under investigation for something and there's some hint that maybe they did what they are alleged to have done? How do you as a
Mhm.
peer supporter sit with that feeling of, gosh, like, they did that, I'm not going to like this person, or the person's being difficult, right? The person's being a jerk. How do you peer support with a person? I tell people it's hard to hug a cactus, right? And so how do you peer support with someone whose um, way of dealing with their hurt and trauma is to be abrasive?
Mhm.
Because we don't just say, "Oh, well, you're just a jerk. Forget it." We don't peer support anybody unless they're nice. That's not how this should work. And so I get to dive into and offer things like that, that I just don't. I've never seen anyone write about this anywhere.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I can't say that I've seen anybody put together a 5 pages, much less 375 pages, on this subject. Yeah, not to, I want people to go and grab that, 200 to 375 pages off of Amazon, but to give folks a little bit of a preview, and if for no other reason, I'm interested in your answer on this, and it's about me.
yeah.
I'm an only child. Is every department is different. I think
Hmm.
of, yeah, a peer support team for the Alabama State Police is going to
Hmm.
be quite different than FDNY, and even
Hmm.
different from, say, where I live, in Long Beach, California, where the chief is very, very big on officer wellness. Is there a component to a peer support team that is somewhat universal, that, if you're going to go down this road and create a peer support team, here's
Hmm.
the one, maybe couple of things, you really need to have?
Yeah, and I actually tease that apart and say, and have resources and links to things that say, here's what the recommendations are for forming rural teams. Here's what the recommendations are for some of those rural communities to have interagency teams and interagency, police, fire, EMS, dispatch officers, this kind of stuff. So, because they're going to be co-responding, they're going to be regarding each other as peers versus in a metropolitan area, the police would think it would be weird to have EMS in on their training or any number of other kinds of things unless they're in a specialty unit. But I also talk about how it's different in certain units like wildland firefighting, embedded nurses in correctional settings, and mental health providers embedded in correctional settings, and or co-responding with people in the field. And so I talk about some of these specialty teams and some of these interagency and rural teams, and how and then in those last chapters where I talk about specialized teams and interagency peer support, I will say all of the following is the same in terms of how you build the team and how you give some of the foundational training. Here's what's different when we're talking about wildland firefighting or a correctional setting or mental health people involved in it or a flight nurse or that kind of stuff, or having these rural versus metropolitan agencies. So I actually tease those things out in the last two chapters of the peer support book. So ta-da!
And you got the teaser right here. So
Yeah.
so much good information. Really, really appreciate what you're doing out there. As we wrap up here, whether it's on peer support or resilience or another piece of your work, is there a number one tip or something that you'd like to share with our first responder audience that they should really know, that they should really remember when it comes to mental health and helping themselves?
Oh, there's a lot of pressure on that question. I
Yep,
absolutely hate that question because
I know. That's why I asked it. I'm good at that.
I have 14 tips on 14 ways I could answer that question, maybe even 1400 ways I could answer that question. I mean, I think the one thing, and I've said this several times this week, as I've done this series of training for a fire department, is don't wait until you're tore up from the floor up
Mhm.
to talk to someone, because the reality of it is again, I come back to that waterfall. It's a lot easier to help you upstream and say, hey, look, there's a hand that's reached out here. Pull yourself to shore, take a breather, take care of yourself, take a look at your surroundings. Who's in your world that's going to lift you up? What's in your world that is lifting you up? And keeping your head above water, and what is out there that's actually pushing you down or failing to grab your hand when you're asking for help, and really try to have some clarity on that. And don't think of asking for help as some indication that you, as a first responder, the problem solver, the self-sufficient, no longer is self-sufficient or no longer a problem solver, because that's not the case either. If you go to a first responder clinician, they're going to just assume you're a problem solver and you have a history of being self-sufficient. Now, if you've lost any part of that, they're going to help you rediscover it. Right? If it feels like it's been covered over by doubt and any number of other things that you hurt and that kind of stuff, they're going to help you rediscover that aspect of yourself. And so don't wait to ask for help, and make sure you understand that the privileged conversations are really that they're privileged. And
Right.
again, I talk about it in the book, the difference between confidentiality and privileged. It's protected health information when you talk to us, and there's exceptions to that, as there are exceptions to everything. But we actually make sure we are very careful in the way that we visit with you about things and document things, and because we never want anything to be used against you unnecessarily and those types of things. And so just see us as a resource for you, and see your peer support. If your peer support isn't a resource for you, scrap them and get a new one, because you deserve to be happy.
Yep. Yep, great tip. I think back to your parable example, and I was fortunate looking down on that waterfall, about to take a dive, and fortunately, some people helped me, and I made a different choice. But I could think of at least one individual where hands were being held out, and he decided to take the plunge anyway, and now he's unrecoverable. So yeah, that's to your point in the parable. If you find yourself looking down that waterfall, it's not refreshing.
No, it's not. No, and that's a hard crash down there. Some people do not recover.
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
recover.
I know that, unfortunately, but we've got people like you helping our first responders out there, and for that I am extremely grateful. Before we let you go, for those folks that are watching or listening to this that need a Dr. Stephanie Kahn out there to speak, the book, for some help, whatever it may be, how can they best find you out there?
Well, you can find me on LinkedIn. I have a first responder psychology Facebook page as well. But easy enough, my website is firstresponderpsychology.com. So first is spelled out, FIRST, responderpsychology.com. And so I have a list of trainings. I've got trainings that I'm doing in person. I have some virtual. I'm creating an on-demand series. So folks, if they miss something that I offered virtually and they want to snag it and play it for their peer team or play it for their agency, we're going to start having that as an ongoing offering. And yeah, they can find any of that there. And then I will have pre-orders for bulk copies of the peer support book. My publisher does a really good job of saying, hey, if someone wants bulk, we will waive tax and shipping and give a discount and ship it straight out to them. And so if someone's looking and they're like, hey, can you do better than Amazon? Yes, the answer is yes. And so that's on the book that's already out there or on the one that is coming out there. And so try to get those out to you. And if anybody wants one that's signed by me, I sign them and ship them in the continental US or the lower 48, I should mention. If someone wants a special message, I love writing messages to people and in my resilience book and sending it out. So yeah.
Well, I want a signed copy. Is it extra to get a signed copy now? Is that like an extra $20 to get a Dr. Stephanie
No,
Kahn signature?
no, it's just because I buy these from my publisher. I buy the copies from my publisher and then I just sign them with a blue marker, which is how you know I'm the one that signed it, is I only write with a blue marker inside of here. And yeah, and then I just ship for whatever it costs me to ship them, depending on where you're at. So yeah, but that's available on the website.
Got it. Perfect. Well, I really appreciate what you do, and really, I know you're a busy person. I appreciate you taking some time with us today, Doc.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I actually did have fun.
I said we were gonna have some fun, and
Yeah.
damn it, I know I had fun, and I'm glad to hear that you had fun. So thank you
Yes.
again for being with us, and thank you to all of you who have either watched or listened to this episode of Public Safety Talk Radio, and we'll be back with you next week with another great guest. Public Safety Talk Radio is produced by Bader Training and Consulting. Public Safety Talk Radio is also proud to be a part of the growing National Police Podcast Network. The National Police Podcast Network is a dedicated media network powered by the National Police Federal Credit Union, developed in partnership with experienced podcast professionals and public safety advocates. Learn more about the National Police Federal Credit Union at nationalpolicefcu.com.